Opioid addiction is a national public health crisis that affects individuals and families regardless of their age, race, or income. The statistics are overwhelming. More than 130 people die from opioid addiction every day. But there is hope. Recovery is possible. The information contained in these podcasts is solely for informational purposes and should not replace advice from a medical provider when making healthcare decisions. This podcast contains opinionated content and may not reflect the opinions of any organization this podcast is affiliated with. We will discuss opioid use and opioid treatment, which may be triggering for some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Today on Someone You Know, we are speaking with Michael, a veteran, a volunteer, a community member, a person in recovery, and someone you know. In our conversation, we explore the role service has in Michael's journey to recovery and his dedication to living his life as a public servant. Michael concludes by inspiring hope for those who are struggling with addiction and shares his thoughts on how we can reduce the stigma. I'm your host, Heather Major, and this is Someone You Know. So Michael, thank you again, as always. We love seeing you. We love hearing from you. You being one of the first ambassadors of the Someone You Know campaign has really meant a lot to us. And I thank you on behalf of the foundation for your participation and your involvement and your courage. And I think today we'll be able to talk a little bit more about that courage and how that courage has helped you throughout your life, through your journey with recovery, but also through your service, your volunteerism, your service with the military, and courage to do things that you weren't necessarily willing and wanting to do before. So I want to turn it over to you. Who is Michael DeMeo?
Well, first, I never thought that, for a long time, I didn't think that I was capable of recovery. I remember at some point around 2009, I had just started the heroin addiction, and I remember thinking, and I was working, and I remember thinking, this is going to be my life forever. And I was always trying to catch my breath. I always felt like I was just keeping my head just above water. And I remember thinking around the fall of '09, this is my life, and I have to find a way to just exist. And that's really sad, trying to find a way to just exist. And, really quickly, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of the passing of a friend, Nick. And I sold Nick his first bag of heroin, and I escaped that misery, and he didn't make it out. And after I recorded the video, I struggled. Did I do the right thing? How are people going to accept it? People in recovery, are they going to accept it? Because so many people in recovery value their anonymity. I know people that will give you their bank card and their PIN number before they tell you they're in recovery. So as far as Nick, when I was still grappling with, did I do the right thing? And when I read Nick's obituary last year, April 15th, 2018, I felt like Nick's passing had sealed the deal. I knew without a doubt that my decision to break my anonymity and share my story with the Someone You Know campaign, I feel like it was the right thing to do.
So let's talk, though, about your history.
So my mother was in active substance use her entire life. And so I think that's important for people to know, because even though we had a good upbringing, but there were just certain things that were difficult and challenging with Mom. And as a result, I feel like as a young kid, I struggled with anxiety and fear. So then fast forward 13 years old, I'm in high school my freshman year, and we started going to these dances with some neighborhood friends. And I remember the first couple dances that I went to, I was super quiet. I didn't talk to the girls, I didn't dance, I was a wallflower. And then I think it was the fourth dance, a friend of mine, he stole a bottle of Crown Royal. And so that night, walking to the high school, we were drinking that bottle of Crown Royal. And I remember as I took a swig, it burned, but I remember after about 15 or 20 minutes that I felt at peace. I felt comfortable for the first time in my life in my skin. The fear was gone, the anxiety was gone, and I could talk to the girls and I could dance. And so for the next 4 years, the only thing that mattered was how was I getting a bottle of booze for Friday and Saturday night, And there were kids in my neighborhood that were smoking marijuana and doing hallucinogens, and there was some meth going on. But because of like my mom, I always had this issue. I didn't want anything to do with drugs. And I had come from a family of a lot of addiction, a lot of substance use. So then I drank, and I went into the military. I graduated high school at 17. I went right into the military 3 months later, and I continued to drink. You know, I was 16 years old. I would wake up on a Sunday morning and call my friends and ask where my car was. How did I get home last night? So then I went from alcoholism to like the military. I was in during the Cold War era. I was an aircraft mechanic on fighter jets, F-15s. It was super cool. Like I was 18 years old, standing on the flight line, and I would look down, and there were 72 F-15s, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, how many 18-year-olds get to experience this? And when I came out of the military in '89, I came home, and all my friends were doing cocaine, and then I started using. I fell in the trap. So within 6 months, I was in my first outpatient rehab, right? So just like from 1989 to 2003, I was in 11 rehabs and 14 detoxes, and a couple psychiatric units. So my substance use happened fairly quickly, and it just exploded. And then, so in 2001, even though I had the injuries to my knees from the military, it made me susceptible to injuries in civilian world. So I fell off a ladder in 2001, and within the first time I went to see the pain management doctor, I remember he wrote me a prescription for OxyContin and oxycodone. OxyContin 3 day, and then for breakthrough pain, oxycodone. So now there's a lot of narcotics looking back for like, you know, eventually I had a knee replacement, and I was addicted to these chemicals, you know, and I would go to treatment, come out, and not do anything different. So from 2003 to 2013, it was a 10-year relapse. A lot happened in those 10 years. The arrests started to come, probation, jail. And then the one thing I like to stress, in the entire 90s, all of 1990, from 90 to 99, I was basically homeless. I lived in crack houses. So from 89 to 2003, all those treatments, and then from 2003 to 2013, in 10 and a half years, I did not draw a sober breath. It was drugs, alcohol, heroin, crack, Adderall, Klonopin, Xanax, OxyContin, oxycodone, all those chemicals. And then September 8th, 2013, I woke up one morning and I just had enough.
You know, and obviously a lot of things happened after that moment. You know, your active substance use, you're in and out of treatment, you're disconnected from the community, you're disconnected from your family, you felt selfish, but you came through. But why do you think that is that you actually stopped?
In April of 2011, 4 things happened to me that month. My truck was repossessed. I got fired from my job, and the man that I was working for taught me the trade. I knew him since I was 12. I got kicked out of the basement. I was renting a basement off some guy, and then my girlfriend overdosed and died. And that was in April of 11, and I was on the verge of being homeless. And instead of going to a shelter, I reached out to my parents, and they let me come and live with them. And at this point, I was on Social Security disability. I was unemployable. I was so consumed in my heroin addiction. I was shooting almost 2 bundles a day, which is like 20 bags of heroin. I couldn't stop using. So I moved in with my parents, and I blamed Joy's death on me. I was supposed to protect her, you know, and I didn't. And when I woke up that morning and she was not breathing, it was one of the worst moments of my life, you know. I remember standing in a hotel room and with her 9-month-old, and the EMT, the paramedic, turned to me and said, she's gone. She'd been gone for a couple hours. And then the police came. And then when this woman came into the room, and the back of her coat, it said Montgomery County Coroner, and that hit me hard. So from April 11th up until I went into treatment in September of 2013, like I was in this downward spiral. And all my life consisted of, like, was getting and using and finding ways and means to get more, and that was it, you know. So I lived in this world of, it was dark, it was lonely, and it was very dark. It's very dark. That's the word. You know, when I hear the song "Crawlin'" by Linkin Park, that song reminds me of those last 6 months. But I couldn't stop. So one morning, September 8th, 2013, I came to that morning. Something was different. I was physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually bankrupt. Like, I just had enough. I couldn't take it anymore. For the first time, I had a desire to live, not in active substance use. So I reached out to AA that day, and I didn't have a license. I was on probation. Then a car my father drove me to a meeting that night, and I met a woman who's one of my best friends. And a few days later, I got into treatment, and that's when the change began.
And you said earlier, it's a process. Every day, it's a process.
Yeah.
But not just being in recovery is the only part of the process. You have a lot of other things going on in your life today that you had to take steps towards. You had to, demonstrate courage. You had to pursue goals. And would you say your life is much brighter now?
Oh, my gosh. Making amends was, I'm glad step 9 is step 9. That's the main step when we start making amends. So within my first month, I'm already involved in service within this 12-step fellowship. And that's how it all began. So the first year and a half, I was rooted in this 12-step fellowship at the group level, making coffee, at the district level, setting up, and then at the state level, going to meetings and meeting like-minded people. And then God put somebody else in my life. In September of 2015, I go to a funeral for my uncle, who's also a veteran. He was a Marine. And one of my other closest friends, Rose V., she's at the funeral, and she was on the board at the Veterans Group of Philadelphia. So now I went from all my service in a 12-step program. God put somebody else in my life, and they put some more people in my life, and then it started to grow from there. So then the first time I went to the Veterans Group of Philadelphia for Thanksgiving, I went there, I helped cook, and then we served the veterans, and then we went into Kensington with 150 meals, and that was it. I was hooked. That was it. And then I went to my first Mission Continues event. So, I served my nation, and then in the Mission Continues, we serve our communities. The mission continues, right? And the cool thing about the Mission Continues is that, we empower veterans and other veterans to serve a community. And I have had the opportunity to do lots of really good volunteering at Thomas Edison. And in fact, that's how I met you. I met you and your husband, Chris, at an event that United Way funded.
You were the hardest working person in the room. You were already working before anyone else got working, and even after our volunteer time had expired, you were still working and still encouraging other people, to pitch in. And we did a really good thing that day. It's amazing how when people get together and focus on a goal, great things can happen. But this is something you do on the regular. This wasn't,
yeah.
You're so involved.
I have not had dinner with my family on any holiday in 4 years. It's always in Kensington with the Veterans Group of Philadelphia. The thing about volunteering that I find to be so powerful is that I got to read something. So there are many promises in the 12 steps, and one of my favorite promises is this one. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us, right? So I believe that in order for me to stay grateful, gratitude equals service, right? I believe that if I say that I'm grateful, I'm a grateful person to be in recovery. I believe that gratitude is the shortest lived emotion. Think about it. How many people say, oh, I'm so grateful for you, but when that person does something wrong that gets you a little angry, you forget about the gratitude, right? So I really believe the gratitude is the shortest lived emotion. And for me, as a person in recovery, I still have all the stuff that goes on, the selfishness, the resentments, the fears and insecurities. But so in order to stay grateful, I stay rooted in service. So not only do I stay rooted in service in a 12-step fellowship, I stay rooted in the service of my community. I feel like it's imperative for me to stay involved in service because it gets me out of myself. No matter what I'm going through in my own little world, my little designs and my plans, they're nothing compared to what somebody else is going through. Like at Thomas Edison, like you said, we did a really good job in that classroom. It wasn't until I started getting involved in the Philadelphia School District that I realized what we take for granted in the suburbs, they don't even have in the city, Once you get involved in service, you just want to keep doing more service because it takes us out of ourselves. I get to like meet like-minded people, and I get to network, you know, and I get to improve the communities. You know, we've painted classrooms in Lamberton Elementary in West Philly. I've been down to Baltimore last summer. Went down to Baltimore for 3 days, and with the mission continues, 100 of us. There was a huge field filled with garbage. It took 3 dumpsters and 4 dump trucks of getting rid of all this garbage. We did it all day in the pouring rain, right? And then we built 8 planters and converted this beautiful field. And that's when as a result of volunteering, I heard the word food desert. I never knew what a food desert was. Like, that's just crazy. People in the city have to take the bus, like a 2-hour bus ride to get fresh fruits and vegetables. So we built an area for the folks in Baltimore to plant vegetables. Like, that's the kind of things that, like, improve other people's community. And then, you know, like I said about sometimes what I'm going through is nothing compared to what the next guy's going through. When you go into Kensington and feed somebody that's homeless and just to, you know, give them a meal and a bottle of water and look at the smile on their face and they're so grateful. It just gives my life more value, you know.
You have such a purpose, and it is truly admirable. And I think you're right.
Doing God's bidding.
Service to me, with regard to you, Michael, is your service as a veteran and your service as a volunteer. But you've moved into a new phase of service, a new role of service that's really civil service. You have an amazing opportunity that you're pursuing right now through an internship. You want to talk a little bit about that? Well,
so in March of 2016, I was working electrician and I had another fall. And that fall officially retired me from doing electrical work. I had torn cartilage and torn lateral and medial on the left knee. And so the doctor said to me, you have to retire your work boots. And I didn't know what to do. And I spent that summer thinking about the summer of 16, like, what am I going to do? What's my path? I've always had an interest in the law, you know? So I decided to go back to college. And even that was a process. I was living in Pottstown at the time, and I went to Montgomery County Community College at the West Campus, and I had to take placement tests. And I graduated high school in '87. It's August of 2016 now, and had to take placement tests, and that was scary, and meet with the admissions counselor and deal with financial aid. I didn't get hooked up with the VA yet. And and then start classes, and that was scary, you know, 45 years old, start on a new career path with a bunch of 18-year-olds, and it's been really cool. They've been amazing, you know. So that journey's been amazing, like going back to college and working hard. Like, you know, I have a learning disability, and as a result, there's lots of help and accommodations, you know, hooked up with OBR. Those folks have been great. The folks at Montgomery County were great. And one of my disabilities is math. Like, I really struggled with math. So I had to take 2 developmental math classes in order to take Accounting 110 for my degree. I'm pursuing a degree in paralegal studies. I'm 4 classes away. I remember, you know, those first 3 semesters of math, I would spend 12 hours a week in the Learning Center with a tutor.
You had to work hard.
Had to work hard.
You had to work harder than a lot of other people have to work.
And the cool thing is, like, I was inducted into the National Honor Society at Monco, Phi Theta Kappa, so I'm a Phi Theta Kappa member. Like, how's that possible? You know, like, so, like, anything is possible. You know, I went from, like, when you think about it, I had 27 years of active substance use, 27 years. And it wasn't just like a walk in the park. It was painful. It was dark. It was lonely. It was horrible. And to know where I am today, it's just amazing. So I transferred out of Munco and I moved to Bucks County, and I started attending Bucks County, got into their paralegal program. I got this amazing internship with the Bucks County Public Defender's Office back in September, and I've been there, and I feel like that's where I'm supposed to be. God put me in this place because I would say 95% of the crime has to do with substance use, you know? And this internship is amazing. I get to interview defendants. I sit with them and I get their background. I read the criminal complaint. I get their version because there's always 2 sides. And yeah, and like, I've been arrested 4 times. I have 4 misdemeanors on my record, which that's a challenge. I feel like I have to work a lot harder than the paralegal that's 20 years old, that doesn't have a background, and here I am, 49, with a list of stuff. Like, I have to work really hard, and that's another reason why I took these internships, to beef up my resume. And so it's just been amazing because, like, I'm sitting with these defendants, and a lot of times they aren't clean, and they're facing this mountain of legal stuff. And I can say, listen, it's going to be okay, because I've been in your seat. I've always used the public defender's office. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. Like, there's hope. And even though they don't see it, I try to give them hope. And then there are times where I have a defendant sitting in front of me, and they're facing a mountain of charges, but right after their arrest, they went to detox and rehab and then a halfway house, and now they're living in sober recovery, and they're attending 12-step meetings. And so I get to see the success, and then also share with him, like, listen, I was where you are. Keep trudging that road, and you could be here someday. You know what I mean? So, like, God has really blessed me. And, I came to AA looking for a way out, but through finding a way out, I found God, and, trust God, clean house, and help others. Cleaning house meaning doing the step work and keeping my side of the street clean. Trusting God, cleaning house, and help others. I can't fail.
You're a really wonderful person, Michael. This has been great, just getting to talk to you a little bit more about you. Is there anything beyond what you've already shared that you think it's important for people to hear? What's the one thing, if you've thought about it, what's the one or two things that you want people to know about Michael?
So for the last couple of days, I've been thinking about this podcast, and every morning, it's important to me. I pray and meditate, and I pray and then I listen. And the thing that I want the most I want somebody to know and to hear that if you're a family member with a loved one that's struggling with substance use disorder, if somebody is out there and they're struggling with substance use disorder, I want them to know that if I can find recovery and my life can change, then anybody's life can change. Because I had 27 years of hard using. So if you're dealing with a loved one that's struggling with substance use disorder, what they desperately need is your unconditional love, compassion, and patience. Because loving someone is not enabling them, it's loving them. Love is love, and they desperately need it. So no matter how angry we get at our loved ones, we have to remember that they are sick people, right? They're not bad people. They're sick people. And just remember that. Before being involved with someone I didn't believe in medication-assisted therapies. But I believe, because of being involved with someone I believe that we have to help reduce the stigma. And how do we reduce the stigma? By language, not addict, person struggling with substance use, not addict, person in recovery. Like, in 12-step meetings, I announce myself, I'm Michael, and I'm a person in recovery. I don't say, I'm Michael, I'm an alcoholic, you're an addict. So this campaign has taught me about harm reduction and meeting people where they are. Not where I want them to be, meeting them where they are and just loving them and accepting them, because I have a brother that's struggling and active out there. And I just want to thank IBC for putting together this wonderful campaign, because it has opened doors for me. I speak at prisons. There's been so many. I made the front page of the Sunday Daily Times. There's been multiple media articles written about me, like, all good stuff. Now, I've not had one person, and I was waiting for it. I'm sure that person's going to eventually have something nasty to say. But if they do, so be it. But this Someone campaign has changed my life on many levels. It has opened doors. And all I had to do is just be honest and be willing. I'll just end with this. Like, one of my favorite quotes is by Albert Einstein. How can you fix the problem with the same thinking that created the problem? So you could go to treatment and then come out of treatment and not do anything to change your life. You have that same thinking. But you can go into treatment and then get involved in all the resources that are out there in our communities to help you change your life. Your thinking will change, and then you'll change, and you'll be a completely different person. Recovery is possible.
I love that you said, I'm Michael, and I'm in recovery. And I think that's a perfect way to close this episode, is that you're not just a person in recovery, but you are a person in recovery. And all of your experiences to date have led you to this wonderful and I'm quoting you now, this wonderful, beautiful life that you get to live every day. And what could be better? If you or someone you know is suffering from opioid addiction, please visit ibxfoundation.org/SYK. The link is in our show notes below.